Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. I want to welcome everybody to another morning of inspiration of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. These examples that we see in these people is almost unknown, particularly whenever it comes to the legal aspect, the way they functioned as a governance and the leadership and the standard that was set. The whole world is in grave need of people with this type of character and this type of sense of justice and sense of caring for human beings. And so I'm going to talk to you about a few stories today that really represent the Islamic idea towards sin and sinners. So the first story that we have is basically a story told by Abdullah bin Mas'ud whenever he had become a governor in the time of Umar ibn Khattab. So he was basically in charge of a city. So while Abdullah bin Mas'ud was walking through the village, a man came with his nephew. He jerked him over. He says, "This is my nephew. He's been drinking." And so Abdullah said, "Are you sure?" He said, "Yeah." And so then he shook him like this. And basically the idea is to get whatever's in his stomach churning. And then he told him, "Now breathe." This is their 7th century breathalyzer. So then he breathed, and it was obvious that his breath was completely full of alcohol and wine. So Abdullah did the necessary, and he put him in the jail overnight. And the next morning, they brought him out for the official punishment, which is 40 lashes. And so Abdullah then grabbed they have a few different kind of leather wrapped sticks with like something on the end, and so the one he got has these little thin almost like strings on the end of them. And so the purpose is that this will not be harmful in any way. It will just be something that will be a bit of a humiliating thing to be seen, having somebody flick you 40 times on your back. So Abdullah, they came forward, and he asked him to, he asked the guy who was in charge of this penal code, applying the law, go ahead and hit him. He said, "Don't raise your hand to where we can see your armpits." And what he means by that is, don't be doing like that, just like that. And he said, and make sure you move around to all of the spots so that it doesn't start to create like a whelp in one spot. And so the people were watching, and then somebody said, "Abdullah, what would be the situation in which somebody would have a very thick, hard whipstick or even a whip used against them because they had heard that some rulers were doing that?" He said, "This is only against corrupt rulers," meaning when someone becomes a corrupt ruler and then the caliph, the executive branch, finds out and the evidence is brought forward, then that person will have a painful punishment. But in general, the purpose of this is not to injure somebody's body. It's about humiliation for having gotten drunk as a Muslim and made a mockery of yourself and your family, and to make you want to never be in this situation again where everybody's looking at you. So then after the 40 lashes were done, the young man's uncle then was upset, and he told Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anh, he said, "You didn't even really discipline him at all. He hasn't really learned his lesson. He has not truly been humiliated for this sin that he has committed. He's committed a crime." And Abdullah bin Mas'ud said, "I learn everything I do from the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him." And he said, the truth is that Allah is very forgiving, and He loves forgiveness from people. But it is also true that the government authority should never turn away a criminal when the proof is brought forth and the crime has been proven. So then in this case, we have to apply the ruling. We can't just turn somebody away because we feel bad for them and we want to be mercy. So he's kind of implying that had you have been more merciful, we wouldn't have been through all this. So he was just applying the mercy that should have been, but with the actual punishment. So then Abdullah bin Mas'ud, he said, "Let me tell you a story of where I learned this from." He said that the first time there was ever the punishment of stealing, by the way, the recorded accounts of somebody's hand being removed for stealing over the whole Islamic history is literally under 100 in 1,400 years. So it's not like that's not happened every day. So Abdullah bin Mas'ud, he tells us the story of when one of the Ansar, he stole something from inside someone's house. And there were two witnesses that came forth. And they bore witness, and the evidence was there, and so then they brought him forth. So when they brought him forth and they put his hand on the, whatever it is, place wherever they take it, and they chopped his hand, the Prophet's face cringed. They said his face looked like what happens when somebody gets dust in their eyes, and they just, you know. So they asked him, "O Messenger of God, this is Allah's ruling. So why do you seem like you're, bothered by it?" He said, "Why shouldn't I be upset? You all are actually Satan's helpers against your brother here, who lost his hand. Truly Allah is forgiving and loves forgiveness. It is the truth that no governing authority, when the evidence is brought and the case is proven, that they would leave the punishment that Allah has prescribed. So we had to do it." And so what basically we understand from this is that the Prophet ﷺ is saying, maybe you could have just got the property back and just overlooked it and forgave him. Why did we have to go through with such a harsh punishment? I don't see this as a very grave, it's a technicality, right? So the Prophet ﷺ was showing that, yes, there is a strong punishment there, a harsh punishment there. But that is for someone who is, a serious sinner and someone who's really, gone past all bounds and so forth. But the law is the law, and they brought him forth, and the witnesses testified. And so the man lost his hand. So during the Caliphate of Umar, he had a policy that anyone who would like to come complain or tell him about their experience in any governorate or area of his rule, then they would come. So Abdullah bin Umar tells us the story. He's like, me and my dad, we were walking around in the pilgrimage, and some man rode up to us on his donkey, and he stopped and he started to cry, and he just started to look at us. So we figured he's looking at us and he needs our attention. So we went over there, and he said, "I saw my father getting kind of teary-eyed himself." And he said, "What's wrong, so brother? Let me see if I can help you. If you're in very bad debt, I can get some zakat and we can pay for that. If you're scared and somebody's threatening you or your livelihood or your family, then we will give you safety and protect you. But if you have done some grave sin, if you murdered somebody, then we will make you face death as retribution." So then the man came out with it. He said, "You know what? I drink alcohol." And Abu Musa al-Ash'ari is the ruler of where I'm at in Iraq. So not only did he whip me, he shaved my head, and then he took me around town, and he said, "Don't sit with this man. Don't spend time with him. Don't trust this man ever again. He is a drunk. He got drunk." And so he took him all around the city saying this about him. So this man says, then at that point in such humiliation, I thought to myself, I have three options. I can kill Abu Musa for doing such a thing to me. Or I can go ask Umar and see if he'll give me some means or way to travel to Syria and make a new life where nobody knows me. Or I will just go join the enemy and get drunk with them. So when he said this, Umar was crying. And Abdullah bin Umar, he said, we saw the tears coming out of his face. So look how soft-hearted he was, subhanAllah. So Umar then, he said, look, of course I'm not pleased with you that you drank alcohol, and that's a serious, grave sin. But I myself used to drink a whole lot in the days of ignorance before I was a Muslim. And so it's not like it should be treated like fornication, and he's kind of taking the analogy of the fornication ruling of adultery. So then he called for his secretary, and he said, please bring me a letter, and I will send a letter to Abu Musa. So he wrote in this letter, peace be with you, salamun alayk. And he said, this man came and informed me of what you have done. And by Allah, if you were here with me now, I would smack you upside your head and take you around town and tell everybody what a terrible leader you are. He then decreed in the letter that as long as this man is staying clean and he's not drinking alcohol, then people should be commanded to spend time with him, be his friend, and trust him. And he then gave the man a brand new camel and 200 dirhams, which is a whole lot of money, as a feeling of responsibility from the caliphate, from the ruler. This type of, concern for the welfare of people, this kind of concern for a rigid, harsh, penalizing system, So, when you hear these ridiculous stories about ISIS, these people don't know anything about the religion. They did not study about the companions or anything like that. So it's obvious. So Abu Darda, one time he was walking by a man who had sinned, and then he walked with some other people who knew about his sin. And while he was walking with them, they were mocking and cursing this guy. Yeah, this guy did. It doesn't say in the hadith what sin did he make, but they said, yeah, this guy, he did this, and they were just basically backbiting him and mocking him and all of this. And then Abu Darda said, hold on, listen here. If you found that man, no matter what sin he made, and he was trapped in a well, he fell over in a well and it's dry in there and he needs out, you going to leave him there or get him out? They said, of course we will pull him out. They don't want them to starve to death in the bottom of a well. He said, then give life to your brother. And so don't ever mock your brother in Islam. So what you should be doing is praising Allah that He has blessed you, that you don't have to deal with these sins that He dealt with, that He has protected you. Allah protected you from such sin. He guided you and He blessed your situation, that you didn't fall in the sin like He did. So thank Allah for that. Don't think you're so great and holy. Then they said, but shouldn't we detest this man? Shouldn't we hate him for doing such a sin? Abu Darda said, no, you do not detest the sin. You detest the sin, but you do not detest the sinner. So it's the sinner that is, a person who could be good and could be bad, but you dislike the sin. The sin is the problem, because the sin in and of itself is evil, and it happened to have been a choice at one time or another of this person. But unless we know somebody is just known to be outright evil, okay, and all they do is evil, then the sins that people commit, we all commit sins. Every last one of us commits sins. So we should never disdain or detest somebody because they sin. And this is where we got this principle that is now a principle of Islamic character, that we do not detest the sinner. We detest the sin itself that they did. And so when they're not doing the sin, as the famous hadith of the Prophet said, then they're a believer and we take them as such. So may Allah protect us in our understanding and give us the wisdom of such justice and caring for humanity and its best interest and welfare. Inshallah, we will see you tonight at the Living Quran and as we recite the Quran tonight. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.